Man, I had to do some gorilla listening this week. Yeah, I don't mean like the gorilla in the woods where they're kind of like
in the mist.
I don't know if they listen at all, but the military kind of gorilla, the one that's hiding in the woods with the gorillas.
Tactical.
Yeah, 1 track here, 2 tracks there. It was really a busy week.
Oh, I see.
I did manage to get it all done though somehow. And kind of on time too, normal time. But it took a lot of work. Had to give up the books this week.
Oh no.
I don't know, getting busy.
I was kind of down to the wire as well.
Yeah.
And next week's going to be even worse because it's an odd scheduled week and I've got a lot of other things. So just for our regular listeners, after this episode, the next episode will come out on November 3rd.
Right. So we're going to take next week off, in other words.
Right. But we've already got things figured out for that and a lot of exciting music. I'm kind of sad I have to wait another week because I'm really excited to talk about those albums. Yeah. And I'll tell you about those at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, me too. I'm going kind of back into September just to grab some things that I haven't talked about yet because there's an opportunity here to sort of put them on. We have some extra listening time, so I thought I'd go back and get some of the longer recordings out.
In the meantime, this is episode 232 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
Before we get into new things, going back to last week's episode, I want to send out some thanks. First of all, to Antonio Martino of AMA Records for sharing our episode on the company page and also on his personal Facebook page. We featured the recording Mandala on AMA Records by saxophonist Rastko Obradovic from Serbia.
Yeah, I saw those notices from AMA Records on our Facebook page.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard that one, go back and check it out. A unique recording with keyboard bass alongside the piano and some interesting rhythmic tunes. Also, thanks to Gregory Howe at Wide Hive Records, we featured drummer Mike Clark's Itai Doshin, and that's a recording with a lot of great players on it. And so thanks for sharing our episode, Gregory.
Yeah.
And this week, we've got a lot of great music to talk about. We've got another Japan connection in the episode in jazz this time, too. That'll be fun to talk about when we get there. For all these recordings that we're going to talk about, as always, in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist, all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. If you can't see the full description or the recording list and links are hard to follow where you're listening to us now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site, Podbean, podbean.com. Everything's easy to follow there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe and tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and it's another way we can reach more people. Come and follow us on our Facebook page to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. You can leave a message or comment there as well. Check us out on X. We are Adult Music Pod over there. I post links to the new episodes when they're published on X as well. And if you want to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples tonight as usual, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And we're going to start in the religious vein this episode, Mike.
Yeah, well, Baroque does mean religious often, and we're also going French religious here, too. This is Marc-Antoine Charpentier's Messe à quatre chœurs, or Mass with 4 choirs.
This is interesting to me because normally we think of making a space for music. We design a hall or a studio for music, but this was music designed for a space, which is the cathedral.
Right, and Italians did that a lot because they had those really unusual churches, particularly St. Mark's in Venice, which is this really odd space with lots of balconies and sort of transepts and all these sort of side altars and things like that. And they would just put singers all over the church. It must have been a really amazing sort of experience to be there back in the day when they were doing these elaborate masses by the Gabrielli brothers and Monteverdi and etc. Let me just give you the information for this recording first before I get into the information. This is performed by Maîtrise de Paris, CCR, Chœur de l'Opéra Royal, Consort Musica Viva, and conducted by Jean-Baptiste Nicolas. And this is on the Château de Versailles Spectacles label. I like myself a good French label. It's kind of like a French wine.
Yeah.
And it pairs well with French wine, actually. You know, if you're pairing food with wine, you can also pair classical music with wine. I think this goes good with the French wines.
Keep that thought in mind because we've got some French jazz and a wine connection later as well.
Yeah, okay. This was released on September 26th. We have also some soloists on this, and they are Pauline Gaillard, the soprano, Attila Vargatov, tenor, Leo Guillou-Keredan, tenor. So there are two tenors, and they don't really indicate who's who.
Of course.
On the tracks. This drives me crazy. Come on, just tell me who's singing. And then Halidou Nombre, the baritone. All right, the booklet notes claim that this recording is a journey of discovery, and I suppose it is, because we sort of follow Charpentier along when he's listening to his music when he visited Italy, and then finally at the end of the recording we hear his Mass. When he visited Rome, he met Orazio Benevoli and discovered masses for 4 choirs with equal voices, and that's the important part. You know, all the 4 choirs are balanced. And that was the archetype of Roman festival liturgy, so like a high feast day. The recording starts from the premise that Charpentier's 4-choir Mass was of Roman conception. Now, we actually don't know that this is the case, but this is what this program is built around, and it's believable, certainly, and it's a creative approach, so I approve. The approach was to interpret this inspiration as fact and to include it alongside works that Charpentier would have heard, but also to present more distant masterpieces that greatly influenced polyphonic music and inspired the young French composer. All right, so let's go on. We're going to hear a bunch of Italian works first, starting with my favorite, Claudio Monteverdi. I could listen to, this is the dawn of the Baroque era, and boy, I could listen to Monteverdi's music for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy with that. Anyway, we start with the opening of the Vespro della Beata Vergine. This is the Deus in Auditorium. It's very stirring. It's always a spectacular beginning to any recording it's on, no different here. It has less rhythmic spring here, despite the presence of the percussion, who play a liberal part. And I should mention this, the ensemble here has added percussion to especially Charpentier's Mass because they've seen paintings that feature this percussion when playing, and they decided to incorporate it because it seems to have been used to fill in spaces where the harmony doesn't like fill up the entire space. It's a pretty interesting idea. Now, I believe this Deus in Auditorium comes originally from the overture to the opera Orfeo by Monteverdi, so it was also used in the Vespers. The interscattered voices are all easily audible, and the final Alleluia has this fantastic scattered quality as well. I'm going to just sample kind of from the beginning so we could hear the choir. Okay, so we have that addition of the percussion there, which you normally don't hear.
Yeah, and I love the cornetti in there, too.
Oh, they're always great, yeah. That's one of the most attractive parts of the work, actually. Track 2, we have Charpentier's pal, Orazio Benevoli. We get to hear a work by him. Dixit Dominus Secondo Tono a 24 voices. I'll just say it in English. Cioè 6 cori. That is 6 choirs. Wow, this is a big work.
Yeah.
And it's a work I've never heard. We've just been hearing recordings of Benevoli's music for the past 5 years or so. I have to say, I love the massed, scattered voices here, with the soprano providing the occasional arabesque that stands out from the line. That's going to be Pauline Gaillard, if these are the soloists, but they might be the choir singers. Let's listen. Nicolas really keeps things moving at quite a clip there. It's not very fast, but it's got a nice flow at the tempo he gives it. It kind of sounds like controlled chaos, a chaos that's about to burst its bounds, but is held in check. At times, the choir comes together to sing in block harmony and stick rigidly to the rhythm. The singing is very much period instrument style, but we can hear some leanings towards operatic singing. I personally thought it was very difficult to follow the text while hearing this work. There are, after all, 6 choirs, so it's kind of hard to do that. And this isn't a familiar text either. Well, it is. It's Dixie Dominus, but it has a lot of words, so it's kind of hard to know where you are in it. And it moves pretty quickly, too. The sound of the voices themselves is exciting on the recording. Track 3, we're back to Claudio Monteverdi from the Vespers, Sonata Sopra Sancta Maria, Ora pro nobis. Ora pro nobis means pray for us in Latin. And this has a long instrumental at the beginning that sounds lightly played and breaks into a cheerful dotted rhythm at the 1 minute mark. Brass then come in, and the choir is in at 1 minute and 58 seconds. The melody is familiar, but the performance makes this sound unique. It's usually not performed with such a light touch. Now, the text in this is simply Sancta Maria, ora pro nobis, sung over and over many times. We'll hear a little bit of that in the sample. Let's hear it. You know, I always feel like if you get the right intonation, you know, and in this case, Monteverdi sets that as Sancta Maria, that she has to come because it's just so compelling, you know? It just sounds like very attractive. Anyway, the use of percussion here accents the piece's many rhythmic guises. And then we move on to track 4, Giovanni Gabrieli, who composed for St. Mark's in Venice. In Ecclesiis, this is C78. It's a new work to me and features the baritone Hali d'un Ombre. He's got an appealing, deep tone, not terribly rich, but with an inviting quality. Let's hear it. That whole orchestra bursts out right there. Now, tenor Leo Guillou-Queredan is in after the 2 minute mark. I think it could be the other guy, for a rather understated solo, and it sounds like Nombre and the other tenor, Attila Vargatoth, or that could be Queredan. I don't know which tenor is singing which part, are in there too. Then soprano Pauline Gaillard duets with Hali du Nombre singing the baritone. All soloists end the piece together. We move on. Track 5, Lodovico Agostini, Magnificat, 20 voci, that's 20 voices. A cinque cori, 5 choirs. The opening sounds like a boys' choir, and then a full choir comes in to end the line. I actually think they're women's voices at the beginning, but they do sound kind of boyish to me. This has a somber chorus, followed by a dancing, lighter section from the soloists. I kind of hate to even fade out because there's some attractive writing for the voices and attractive singing as well. Pauline Gaillard sings the solo soprano part right there, and duets with women's voices from the choir later. There's a second woman's voice duetting with her, probably from the choir, but she's not listed, so I don't know who it is. Different combinations of voices are heard throughout the ever-changing textures of this piece. And then we get to the last of the Italian works, Giovanni Gabrieli, Canzone per sonar quarti toni, C185. This is an instrumental with a somber tone, separating the Italian works from the Charpentier Mass, which comes next. It's got that old-style Baroque brass sound at the opening, and morphs into winds later, a great character change for the piece. Let's hear it. Some nice moves in there, too, harmonically, for this era. The piece itself moves slowly, probably because it had to fill the vast recesses of St. Mark's in Venice. All right, now we get to the Pièce de Résistance, Marc-Antoine Charpentier's Mass for 4 choirs, H4. An exceptional and unique composition in French music of the last quarter of the 17th century, according to the notes. Track 7 is the Kyrie, and the soloists come in one by one, overlapping each other as in a canon. The whole thing has a lot in common with Renaissance polyphony, except there is instrumental accompaniment here. Pauline Gaillard really soars in her soprano singing. Eventually the choir is in as well, so the movement grows in dimensionality as it goes, coming into being and growing. It's a nice effect. Let's hear this from the beginning. It unfolds slowly and really beautifully. Track 8 is the Christe section of the Kyrie. Gaillard begins this work as well. The other 3 soloists are not far behind, entering as the soprano finishes the first statement of Christe. The harmony is smooth throughout the section, and then in track 9 we get to the third movement, the repeat of the Kyrie. The tenor soloists introduce the final statement here. The section is pretty much left to the intertwining solo voices at the opening. Once again, at around the 1 minute mark, the choir comes in to thicken the texture, and I want to sample the choir as well, so let's hear them here. And the words you're hearing are Kyrie eleison sung again and again. Brass and percussion also are in this piece, as you heard. Track 10, we have a more complicated text here, the fourth movement, Gloria. The opening of the Gloria is light with a dancing rhythm and soprano voices. I kind of like this, so let's hear this. Came as a bit of a surprise. And then the entire choir is in. I really love that opening with those chirping voices. The full choir makes the sound heavier after that, but there are wonderful moments where they all sing a harmony followed by a pause that gives a solemn feeling to the music. Things get more excitable at the 1 minute and 38-second mark when rhythm, percussion, and a more forte attack from the choir propel the music. The two tenors start a more lightly harmonized section at 2 minutes and 20 seconds, so the voices here are Attila Vargatov and Leo Guiu-Keredan. I'm going to sample them too. So let's hear a bit of this. I like the changes of timbre in between those lines, too, the trading off. Really appealing movement. There's a bit of chromaticism in the voices once all of the soloists are in singing their individual parts, and the women's voices from the opening return at around the 4th minute. The entire prayer is gotten through in less than 6 minutes. It's really moved along here with section following section in the movement. Track 11, the Credo, probably the most complicated prayer in the Mass. It's got a lot of words. And this starts with the Gregorian intonation of the first line. The percussion come in right away, and you hear a bass drum. With full choir, the lines rushing forward in overlapping waves. Quick rhythm changes appear with each line, and textural changes too. And again, you're hearing that wonderful passing of the lines back and forth with the words like God from God, light from light, true God from true God, if you know your Mass. They're singing in Latin, of course. It's such a gorgeous effect. The textural changes keep the mind and the ear alert, and I really enjoyed that too. The choir is constantly trading off with the soloists here, an appealing effect. At the 3 minute and 50-second mark, there's a bass drum solo rhythm set, and the baritone Halle du Nombre starts the next section, the rest of the soloists coming in overlapping lines. A new lute-led section in the continuo begins at 5 minutes and 38 seconds for the vocal soloists, sounding more personable here with the light accompaniment. The texture suddenly gets bigger, and this section ends with full voices. Track 12 is the Sanctus, movement 6 in the Mass. Full choir is in for the winding first Sanctus statement. We get to a dancing rhythm after that. The first section ending Hosanna in Excelsis is sung by a full choir, and then the soloists are in for the second section, the Benedictus, with the choir back for the second Hosanna in Excelsis. Track 13 is the final movement of the Mass, the seventh movement, Agnus Dei, or Lamb of God. The words Agnus Dei are given a dotted rhythm, sung by individual sections of the choir, After the first statement of the Agnus Dei, there's a prolonged instrumental section, and we haven't sampled the orchestra alone yet, so I want to hear them. Yeah, some climbing harmony at the end there. The Agnus Dei is back, as you heard, with a climbing sense to the harmony in the choir, and the work ends in full voices. But wait, there's still one track left, and this is going to be another work by Marc-Antoine Charpentier called Domine Salvum Face Regem, H285. This brief piece begins with the bass drum pounding out a rhythm, and full chorus singing the text with some force. Baritone Hallie du Nombre leads the solo voices for some trading lines with the choir. And that's how the recording ends. The program on this album seeks to have us hear Charpentier's Italian influences for his four-choir mass, and indeed it's a pleasure to hear those Italian works on this album, played with a bit of that softness of attack that the French style of performing prefers, yet still coming across as Italian. The Charpentier mass heard after the Italian works is a completely different beast. It's got some of the flamboyance of the Italian works, an effect that I really don't associate with French music, but that's not important. The mass comes across as unique to Charpentier's composition style. It's got Italian elements, but doesn't sound particularly Italian or French to me, and that's pretty exciting. There are constant changes in the mass, textural, rhythmic, timbral. Charpentier shows he's very inventive in coming up with inspired ideas to keep the work interesting and even exciting, something you don't associate with the church. The performances are lively and vibrant, conductor Jean-Baptiste Nicolas alert to each sudden change in the mass. The soloists are all a bit low profile, all performing well and none outshining the others, though by compositional design Pauline Gaillard's soprano often comes soaring out of Charpentier's thick textures. The Château de Versailles Spectacle label continues to release albums that surprise the listener with the excellence of the music and performances on them. Remember the album of Clarambeau's Te Deum and the story of the adulterous woman by A Nocte Temporis, conducted by Renaud de Mechelin, that we heard last May.
Right, yeah.
This is another interesting discovery for listeners, and there are many more, really, so check this label out and this album as well.
It was interesting to hear the Monteverdi and Gabrieli works first and think that that's what inspired these works in the Mass that we hear by Charpentier. And the drums as part of religious works really add a dynamic element. We're not used to hearing that, and I enjoyed that a lot. It makes you want to experience these pieces in a multi-dimensional space of a cathedral, trying to imagine that listening to just two speakers and with the choruses in different areas and side altars and balconies and things like that. For religious works, as you mentioned, they have a lot of contrasts that are really entertaining. You don't really feel solely religious here. There's a lot of musical excitement. Of course, the choral parts are the focus, but the instrumentation was really engaging. I particularly enjoyed the cornetti reaching up high in the Monteverdi, and the Charpentier Credo had some passing harmonic tension in the chorus that really caught my ear as well. So this really held my attention. And I thought it was really entertaining on top of the religious content in the music.
Yeah, great album, great label. Check out other recordings on this label. There's really a lot to discover here. A lot of them are more than one CD, so you can. That's why we don't talk about them, but they're great. Nevertheless, you should still hear them. Okay, next is Chamber Works by 20th century composer Grażyna Bacewicz. We featured her music on the podcast before, but it was always her orchestral works, I believe. Here we have her string quartet number 4 and piano quintet number 1, performed by the Karski Quartet and Jâms Coleman on piano. This is on the Evil Penguin label. This is the second time we're talking about the Evil Penguin label. I wish we could talk about them every week because they have such a great name. And actually, we liked all the recordings we've heard by them so far. But they don't seem to release all that much. They'll do like one album a month, it seems like, or maybe as many as 3. But it's kind of, got to keep looking and see what they come up with. Anyway, this album was released on September 5th, 2025, so a while ago now. Wait till we get to next week, because we're going to go back to September 5th again, I think. Anyway, the Karski Quartet is Kaya Novak on violin, Natalia Kotarba, the second violin, Diede Verpust, viola, and Julia Kotarba on cello. So I guess Natalia and Julia are sisters. Violin and cello playing sisters. Not bad. How you got a duo in the household? Kind of a good thing. Both pieces on this album are 1. Constructed in the pattern of contrasting movements. 2. Feature long stretches of melody. And 3. Oscillate between tonal and modal harmony with dissonant abstract interventions. In both pieces, Bacewicz liberally draws on Polish folklore. And I should mention, these pieces seem to be all about contrast. There's so much, even within the movements, it just kept coming up. So it seems to be a thing that Bacewicz really liked to have for her personal mode of expression. Anyway, first we hear the piano quintet number 1. Track 1 is the first movement, Moderato molto espressivo. Strings fade in on a compelling harmony as the piano plays quiet rising figures. There's a light menace to the opening of the work. It's an introduction to the main sonata. The string quartet has a bright string sound here, projecting the eerie harmony. It's modal for the most part. At 1 minute and 56 seconds, the piano introduces an active rhythm, ushering the first theme of the sonata. Let's hear a little bit of that. There's a lot of passing detail right in that sample just to really like, and it goes on like that for the entire movement, and really for the entire album. So while this is a new work for me, and I have nothing to judge it against, the tempo does seem on the quick side. It's given a lot of energy by these players, and yeah, this is a really energetic ensemble. They're pretty young, I think, as well. The second theme, at around the 3-minute mark, is more subdued with a more mysterious harmony and a late night rhythm, so there you go, contrast. The middle of the movement features modal approaches to melody via the string quartet's chords and interplay between the entire string section and the piano, trading lines back and forth. The piece is well shaped, and within that shape we get some interesting harmonies not usually associated with a sonata. I like the skipping piano theme over the string tremolo at around the 5 minute and 35 second mark. The end of the movement remains slow and moody, not a sonata form in the traditional sense. It comes to a full, mysterious ending, though. Track 2, the second movement, presto, so we get the sort of scherzo movement second in this case, something that 20th century composers did quite a bit. Mahler did it a lot. The opening gesture is pretty compelling. After it sounds, the strings begin a jaunty rhythm and the piano plays a jaunty theme over it. This was a really interesting opening, so I'm going to sample this. Whoa, it's a lot in there. So you get that opening that sounds like an ending, and then after the sort of cadence, a sort of like Bartok-like folk theme sort of starts sounding in the piano in that sort of jaunty rhythm. There's a lot to kind of process in that. String harmonies really stand out in this work, and they're pretty dramatic, played with a sheen by the Karski Quartet. A rather aggressive scurrying section begins at around the 1 minute and 18-second mark. The music grows enervated toward the middle, and the piano injects new life into the music with a jaunty line, which the strings respond to in kind. There's an appealing pizzicato section for the strings at around the 3 minute and 20-second mark, followed by some wild harmony building to the end. Track 3, this is the slow movement, marked grave. The piano provides the first heavy chords, tolling like a giant bell. The strings are in at around the 50-second mark, playing the theme the piano bass laid out in harmony. There's a nice build-up to a chord that initiates a new section at around the 2 minute and 35-second mark. I'm going to sample a little bit after that so that we can hear this new section. I like the harmonic movement in the accompaniment there. Really pretty and kind of hypnotic in a way. A calm theme starts in the strings at around the 4 minute mark. The music finds its way to a harmonic crisis at 5 minutes and 50 seconds, and via sustained string tones and a drifting set of piano harmonies, it quietens and rights itself. An anguished melody comes in mezzo forte and brings the movement to a quiet end. Track 4, the final movement, is marked Compassione. Quick flourishes answered by piano begin the movement. There's some impressive hocketing between the strings and piano leading into the first theme after the brief introduction. The rapid opening theme is followed at about the 1 minute and 20-second mark by a calmer, dusky theme, with the piano playing a calm line as the cello melodizes over it. There's some very attractive writing in the strings there. There's a folk song quality to what we just heard, and at the 2 minute and 40-second mark, the rhythm suddenly speeds up and harmony builds rising tension. There's something slightly bluesy about the theme that follows in the calm interlude at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Now, I want to point something out. The blues, it's not that it's bluesy, but it's just that a lot of Eastern European folk music has bluesy qualities to it, which is really interesting to me. It's really not related to American music at all, but it just happens to have this thing in common. After this, the build-up continues with yet another calm interlude at the 4 minute mark, almost like a resting space before the music resumes its quick pace. A crescendo leads to the dramatic ending. Tracks 5 through 7, we have the 3 movement, String Quartet number 4. The 5th track is the first movement, Andante, moving to Allegro molto. The work has a somber, muted opening. It's ghostly and immediately compelling. The harmony is fairly adventurous for a tonal work. The Karski Quartet gets a bright sheen to their chords when they play out. It's smooth, even, and vibrato-less. Tendrils of melody start to develop in the quiet voices by the 1-minute mark. There are occasional outbursts, a characteristic of how Bacewicz puts contrast into her works. There's a dramatic tutti at around the 2-minute and 50-second mark, and then a solo violin starts a new theme. Contrasting textures follow, such as the intriguing one at 3 minutes and 20 seconds, pizzicato cello with muted tremolos in the middle, and a violin melody on top. Let's sample that. We break out of that texture into a new one. The movement features a lot of quick changes of mood and texture, all of them inventive, too many to detail. I'd urge you to hear this 10-minute movement in full. I was intrigued all the way through. Track 6, the second movement, Andante. The opening is melodic and a bit mysterious. I like the harmonic pulsing chord that's set briefly at the 1-minute and 8-second mark, like a glimmer of light turning on and off, as the other strings melodize over it. I'm going to sample that. This movement also has a lot of quick changes to it. The contrasting sections are heard throughout, and again, I like the interesting creative use of harmonic voicing in the writing. Bacewicz uses extended effects like pizzicato or sul ponticello very subtly and sparingly, so they sound compelling when they actually appear. Track 7 is the third movement, Allegro giocoso. This is also the final movement. The opening has the sense of a folk dance rhythm starting up. Let's get a sample of that. The next section, of course, contrasts in its slower rhythm. At the 2-minute and 4-second mark, there's a chugging rhythm that suddenly speeds up into the quick dance of the opening, but with different melodic material. At 2 minutes and 55 seconds, there's a gorgeous, distant-sounding music box version of the folk theme. A pizzicato section follows the folk theme, very emphatic and present. Again, contrast. How the music will take shape from section to section is always a surprise. Yet the whole thing holds together brilliantly. It comes across as organic, sort of like one thing happening in nature that's caused by another. The movement has a big, emphatic ending, again with some great texture leading up to it. And then on track 8, we get a folk tune called something I can't say. Wupolo Lipenka, or arranged for string quartet by Ignacy Zalewski and the Karski Quartet. This is really a variation on a Polish song, partly improvised and partly arranged. The arrangement sets the opening on harmonics, sounding positively ghostly. The music gains some body by the first minute. Let's hear a little bit of that. Some great harmonics there right at the end. Of course, it's an attractive tune, repetitive in the popular music fashion. The arrangement gives it variety, though, such as the thoughtful arranging by Ignacy Zalewski and the Karski Quartet. At 3 minutes and 24 seconds, a vocal comes in and actually sings the melody. I guess we should hear that too, but I have to say there's no indication in the booklet note as to who sings it. It's a woman's voice. Let's hear it. I imagine it's someone from the quartet singing it, but yeah. I'd like to know who it is. And then there's a surprise track 9 that's on the streaming, and I'm wondering if this is a hidden track on the CD, but it's not listed in the booklet. It's called Oberek, and it's arranged by string quartet by Pavel Charny. It's a work by Bacewicz, and it's a manic dance. It originated as Bacewicz's Oberek No. 1, originally for violin and piano. And Oberek is a Polish folk dance from the mazurka family, and you'll know your mazurkas from Chopin's piano works. Let's sample this. Cool.
Dancy.
Yeah. This comes across as a rondo, with the departure sections engaging in some extended techniques like pizzicati. We heard that, swooping quick glissandi, and col legno, hitting the bow, the back of the wooden part of the bow against the strings. The piece ends with a bang, and that's the end of the album. So far, I've heard a lot of Bacewicz's orchestral works. A lot of them have been released on the CPO and Chandos labels, and they're all sonically compelling. But these chamber works, with their constant contrast and intricate detail, really caught my ear. These are works that should have a wider audience, and in the Karski Quartet's recordings here, hopefully that wider audience will be found. The Karski is capable of the subtlety required in these works, and is alert to every change of texture. They even have a unique sheen when they're playing bright, vibrato-free chords. Jâms Coleman blends in well in the piano quintet, playing with great character. I actually preferred the string quartet on this recording, feeling that the work's inventiveness is put across well by the Karski Quartet's attention and enthusiasm. It gave me a sense of how they work together, whereas in the quintet, they're responding as a unit to Coleman on the piano. And I actually just think the string quartet was just a more compelling piece, although the piano quintet was also very compelling. It's a great album with which to familiarize yourself with Bacewicz's chamber works, and it's on the Evil Penguin label, and you know you want that record label on your shelf because it's called Evil Penguin, right? I want it on my shelf. I don't have any Evil Penguin CDs. I'm going to have to get one somewhere.
Bacewicz's music balances structure with a mercurial nature. Themes and ideas return, but sections change moods really rapidly. Yeah. I had similar impressions from her Symphony 2 and first piano concerto that we heard a little while ago.
Right.
Apparently, her style changed a lot over her composing career, but these two main works on this recording were composed not too far apart.
Yeah, both in the early 1950s.
Right. You'll hear traditional harmony and sections of modal harmony exchanged throughout the works. The piano quintet piece has a moodier atmosphere overall, and I found it really interesting that the string quartet movements all ended with rhythmic endings and definitive cadences.
Right.
That was kind of interesting. I started to expect that for each movement. And as before, this music is really interesting, but I think you'll need repeated listenings to unpack everything that's included, especially in the piano quintet, because it goes by so quickly. And you're saying, what was that? And then you're on to a new idea. And there's a lot of imagination coming along at high speed.
Yeah, those repeated listenings are no great hardship either, because it's all really interesting music.
Yeah, and really well played here.
All right. So we're sticking with the women tonight. For our contemporary composer, we have Dobrinka Tabakova, Sun Triptych. This is an album featuring Maxim Rysanov on viola, Dasol Kim on piano, Roman Mintz on violin and the hurdy-gurdy, and Kristina Blaumane on cello. The BBC Concert Orchestra, conducted by the composer herself, Dobrinka Tabakova. This is on the ECM New Series label, and it was released on September 26th. Now, we've heard Tabakova's music on the podcast once before on our October 16th, 2023 episode, Trumpet Soiree. That was episode 136, a release on the Halle Orchestra's label, featuring them playing Orpheus's Comet, Earth Suite, and her viola concerto and cello concerto. Maxim Rysanov figured on that album too, and we hear him again here. So I guess he's a great champion of Tabakova's music. Tabakova quotes Confucius in the booklet notes, and she says, "To define the future, one must study the past." Oh, I think so too. I really wish people would just absorb that quote. It's so important, especially today. Tabakova presents this set of works with Confucius's quote in mind. The CD booklet has a lot of pictures and a brief note on all the works by Tabakova herself. She doesn't say much about them, but the little she gives really is enough. She wants her music to speak for itself. All right, the first track, the first piece is called Whispered Lullaby for Viola and Piano, composed in 2005. This features Maxim Rysanov on viola and Dasol Kim on piano. The piece first took shape as a song in a children's opera Tabakova wrote as a student called Midsummer Magic. The first viola note is played pulling the bow gently across a single string. There's a gently pulsing piano note heard in the background, then rippling piano chords are teased out of the piano. The viola then plays a gentle melody. The theme of whispers is well realized in the tones of both instruments, particularly the viola. This gentle melody persists throughout the piece, gaining in dynamic presence as it goes, not whispering by the middle. The entire approach in this piece is right in line with the ECM aesthetic. There's something mildly otherworldly about it. Tracks 2 through 4, Suite in Jazz Style for Viola and Piano, composed in 2009. This features Maxim Rysanov on viola, Dasol Kim on piano again, and this is the third suite Tabakova has written for Maxim Rysanov. Track 2 is the first movement, called Talk. The viola begins with a walking pizzicato line. The piano comes in with a slow walking bass in the left hand and a lightly swung line in the right. The viola then picks it up. The viola lets out a surprising bark at the end of phrases, adding a bit of spice to the piece. At 1 minute and 58 seconds, the piano cuts to big tolling chords that the viola rhapsodizes over. The more pleasant opening jazzy line comes back just past the midpoint and pretty much sticks around for the rest of the movement. There's a fun swooping glissando on the viola at the very end of the movement. Track 3 is the second movement called Nocturnal. This starts pensively with a little bit of a blue tone to the thread of piano tone. Eventually, the piano starts on a slow, hypnotic, arpeggiated bass line with some blue notes in it. The viola line has a bit of Gershwin's second piano prelude to it in its blue melancholy line. Nice touch there, leaping into the harmonics. I really enjoyed that too. The piece is mostly played with full-bodied tone, especially in the middle of the work. It's a highly atmospheric movement, setting a fine nocturnal mood. The mood quietens and the end of the piece crescendos again to a bold statement of the blue theme. Good atmosphere is set by both players here, and this movement is a standout. Track 4 is the third and final movement, called Dance. Knocking on wood, possibly the piano's lid, starts the piece. It's a syncopated rhythm, and the viola picks it up and adds harmony to it. The piano joins in, and the viola continues with the line as the piano plays chords. The piano then goes into a very heavy-sounding boogie-woogie rhythm, playing slowly so it's not very dance-like. And the viola plays a line communicating angst. It comes down along with the piano for the next section. The viola gets a solo turn at 3 minutes and 30 seconds or so. All dance quality of this movement is gone at this point. At the 4-minute mark, the dance rhythm of the opening is back with other elements. The piece ends inconclusively on an unresolved, drawn-out viola note. Track 5, Fantasy Homage to Schubert for strings, composed in 2005. This features the BBC Concert Orchestra conducted by the composer Dobrinka Tabakova. Also, Nathaniel Anderson Frank has the violin solo, and Benjamin Hughes plays the cello solo. This is a recontextualization of Schubert's Fantasy in C major for violin and piano. Schubert's opening melody sits in a completely transfigured environment as Tabakova imagines one floating in space, free of gravity. Comets and celestial bodies pass by, and as the Schubert melody is heard for the first time, we catch a first glimpse of planet Earth. This starts so softly we can hear the bows brushing across the strings. The opening chords have a ghostly tone. The entire opening of the piece stays in this atmospheric. The strings eventually start to produce a full tone well after the 3-minute mark. We reach a high crescendo mark at 5 minutes and 20 seconds, and I guess that would be the best place to sample, so let's do that. and the music decrescendos and goes into a new section. Cellos then take over briefly for a throaty reading. They're followed by angelic violins sounding a bit disembodied. A build-up after the 8th minute results in dramatic toned cellos. The violin is in with the Schubert theme solo in the 10th minute, and at this point, the piece seemingly by sleight of hand takes on a Schubertian character. It remains this way to the end, in fact, taking on more of a Schubertian character as it goes. We move to track 6, Organum Light for strings, composed in 2000. This is performed by the BBC Concert Orchestra conducted by Dobrinka Tabakova. This was initially a composition for the 5 singers of Opus Anglicanum, drawing on the polyphonic viol consort works of Gibbons and Purcell. The modal harmony in the drifting string line at the opening of this piece immediately draws the listener in. The harmony finally lightens at 1 minute and 52 seconds as a smaller high string ensemble play another section of the modal theme. There's a gorgeous hymn-like quiet section starting at 2 minutes and 50 seconds with a very light, squeaky-toned violin faintly heard playing an arpeggiated figure. The piece is warm and modal all the way through. Track 7 is called Spinning a Yarn for solo violin and hurdy-gurdy, composed in 2011, and this features Roman Mintz on the violin and hurdy-gurdy. He plays both. Roman Mintz himself suggested the combination of violin and hurdy-gurdy heard in this work. You hear the hurdy-gurdy right at the beginning, including its clicking mechanical elements. The violin itself comes in shortly afterward with a folk-like modal melody. Now, Mintz is playing both instruments here, and I'm wondering if he's playing them both at the same time or if this is overdubbed. I'd really like to know. The music picks up a 2-chord repeating pattern in the violin as the hurdy-gurdy stretches out a bit, and then for a while, surprisingly, both instruments stick to the dotted 2-chord pattern. The piece sort of drifts along modally once it breaks out of the pattern and comes to an uplifting rising line to the final chord to end the piece. And then finally we get the work that we've all been waiting for, the title work Sun Triptych for violin, cello, and string orchestra, composed in 2007. This is performed by Roman Mintz on violin, Kristina Blaumane on cello, BBC Concert Orchestra, conducted by Dobrinka Tabakova. Track 8, the first movement, Dawn, and then there's a quote after each of these titles, and I'll read that too. This is probably printed in the score underneath. And she emerged from the lake with fire in her hands. The first movement was written for Kremerata Baltica's 10th anniversary and Gidon Kremer's 60th birthday. The solace Tabakova finds in nature permeates the work, a subtle journey of light throughout the day. Tremolos on the strings begin the piece, sounding quietly, as though imitating the first stirrings of dawn. The violin plays the opening melody, which is romantic and gorgeous. It's sort of reminiscent of the soaring lines of John Tavener's The Protecting Veil. There's a crescendo for a louder statement, Then a quick diminuendo leads to a lighter string texture, balanced in the higher end. And that line builds up beautifully and goes on. Once the cello is in, it plays some light glissandi that bring a lot of character to its line. There's some really attractive changes from forte to piano in this piece that really pull at the heart. Just at the 7th minute, there's a swell to a crescendo that has the movement ending with a final set of dramatic lines. Track 9 is the second movement, Day, and the quote given here is bees, birds, meadows. This and the last movement were added later. It attaches to the previous movement via a quiet string tremolo. There's a very faintly heard 2-note rocking back and forth pattern. Lines representing the birds are played in repeating minimalist patterns. They're rather wind-like as played here. Now these are all strings that we're hearing too, so let's sample a little bit. I just want to clarify, I did not sample the wind-like part, just the violin and cello playing together. The movement features more intricate movement in the inner voices than the previous one. And then, finally, the third movement, track 10, Dusk. The quote given here is, "They glittered like gold dust in the twilight, faintly, melting into the horizon." This movement connects as well via a single sustained violin tone. A rather questioning string chord follows. The cello has a heartfelt melody at the opening. This deeply felt melody continues until around the 3-minute and 50-second mark, and then fades as though the piece is over. But it goes on, with softer strings now shimmering in the dusky light. This quieter section continues to the end in continuous diminuendo, indicating the slow fading of the evening light. At the end, the strings settle on 2 chords, calmly rocking back and forth, and the piece ends with one of them finally sustained. There's a lot of what I like on this album, and in Tabakova's music in general. Warm strings, modal harmony, and calm rhythms overall. In fact, there might be a little too much modal beauty on this album, especially toward the end, but that's right in keeping with the ECM Manfred Eicher aesthetic, and all the music is really gorgeous. I guess I could single out Organum Light as the piece that stood out the most for me. The works of Gibbons and Purcell drawn on in the composition add even more character, and bring me back to that magnificent past and their magnificent compositions. The soloists all sound totally dedicated to the music. Kristina Blaumane plays the cello with muscular tone, and Maxim Rysanov plays with intensity on the viola, as does violinist Roman Mintz on Sun Triptych. It's an album of atmospheric music that has a heart and longs for peace. And with this album, you can bring that calm and peace right into your headphones.
I enjoyed this a lot. Tabakova can write beautiful themes, like right in the beginning with the opening whispered lullaby, and then the closing Sun Triptych was really enjoyable as well. The other thing I really liked about these works was the viola being featured.
Oh, yeah.
And the jazzy lines in the suite were really fun. Those are some of the more rhythmic works on the recording. And the hurdy-gurdy in a spinning yarn, that was something different and enjoyable to hear as well. Throughout, as you said, the use of modal harmonies makes this music really soothing, maybe a bit much. The fantasy homage to Schubert was kind of different in the mass use of strings, and I found that contrasting to the other works in the middle as well. Overall, really enjoyable and calming program. The string playing is excellent throughout. Nice work here.
We're going to have to get something ear-splitting in the contemporary podcast. We haven't heard that in a while. Not since Boulez back in the spring, I think.
Okay, over on the jazz side, we're going to start out with a piano trio from pianist Kate Wyatt, Murmurations. It's a self-release. It came out October 10th. And thanks to Ernesto Cervini at Orange Grove Publicity for sending us information on this recording. Kate Wyatt is a Montreal-based pianist, originally from Victoria, British Columbia. She got turned on to jazz after playing piano in her high school big band and went on to jazz studies at McGill University. She teaches privately and at Marianopolis College. You can also check out her previous recording, Artifact, from 2022. The trio is Kate Wyatt on piano, Adrian Vedati on bass, and Louis Vincent Hamel on drums. This was recorded by John Caspi at Studio Pierre Marchand in Montreal, mixed with John Caspi at Caspi Mastering, and produced by Kate Wyatt, Adrian Vedati, and Louis Vincent Hamel. Mastered by Dave Horrocks at Infinite Waves Mastering. Mostly this recording features original compositions by the members of the trio, but we're going to start out with something a little more familiar, Mac the Knife, the Kurt Weill tune, here arranged interestingly by Adrian Vedati. Wyatt starts it out solo with a few trickles hinting at the melody. Vedati has reharmonized the tune colorfully. By the time the bass and drums kick in, though, you'll comfortably recognize the melody. Let's hear this recording get started. Wyatt works into improvisations, and I like her smoothness of line even when including more percussive ideas. Things really flow along here as they will through the whole album. Let's hear the climax of her solo. Yeah, I like how she uses phrases from the melody there in with those chiming chords. It comes down softer for a bass solo from Vedati. His tone is thick and warm, developing melodic ideas on the way, and Wyatt and Hamill do some trading eights, and he keeps it nicely restrained, focusing on different tones around the drum kit. They get back to the melody with a delicate music box-like ending on the piano. Track 2 is a Kate Wyatt original, the title track, Murmurations. And there's a note about this tune. She says, I've long been fascinated by the phenomenon of murmurations, nature's spectacle of birds moving in telepathic unison. At one point it hit me that there was a parallel between how flocks of starlings shift and turn as one and the ideal of improvising when the group of musicians moves and breathes as a single organism, responsive, trusting, and deeply attuned to the moment. There's a gentle melody idea for this one. It creates a kind of hesitation with the meter in a pattern of 2 4-beat measures and then a 2-beat measure before gaining momentum into 4 4-beat measures. That goes around twice. Then Vedati takes the center with 8 measures of bass arpeggios into ringing melodic ideas for another section. Wyatt works improvisations that have interesting scales and rhythmic patterns, and they return to the opening melody idea, and Vedati continues on for a bass solo. Let's hear some of his improvisations on this one. He continues on, wrapping it up with the arpeggio idea that's joined by Wyatt. Track 3 is a Vedati original, Sunrise, and Vedati's the focus of the intro here with softly reaching bass lines. Wyatt takes the main repeating 16-measure melody idea going up an octave. That has a sunny mood to it. Let's check it out. Spezzati continues on with a solo, getting animated lines. Things build up to a swinging steam in Wyatt's solo propelled by Hamill's cymbals. Let's hear some of her playing on this one. Exciting playing. They get back to the piano melody again, and then Wyatt continues on with some more improvisations punctuated by drum excitement from Hamill, and it fades out over some chord vamping. Track 4 is coruscation. Interesting word we don't hear very often. To flash or sparkle is to coruscate. Interestingly, the notes say that Wyatt won this tune in a bet with a friend who introduced her to the word, and he hadn't written a tune about it, and then if he hadn't written a tune by the next time they met, then she was going to write it, and so she did. The intro section is a 16-measure bass and left-hand piano arpeggio pattern that the melody will fit over with some interesting harmonic results. It's in an ABA form with 16-measure sections. Let's take a listen. Wyatt gets really rollicking in her solo on this one, so let's check out a little bit of that as well. And they get back to the A section of the melody and then let Hamill work up the drums over a couple sections. A final A and B section lead to a gradually unraveling ending. The next two tunes, the notes say, were written to encourage us to go deeper in the practice of patience in music, leaving space and allowing for a natural and organic build when we play. Listen to these two pieces as a pair. If you listen really closely, you'll hear a cool harmonic trick in Finding, which is track 5 by Kate Wyatt, a rubato solo piano track. It's relaxed and introspective. I'm not sure about the trick, but midway through there is some harmonic meandering with interesting scales that then finds its way home. And track 6, also by Wyatt, Patience, piano chords and a riff that lock in with bass create an anticipation with space. When the idea repeats, Wyatt fills in with higher figures from outside. Vedati gets the focus with a solo that really rings out, and Wyatt builds a lot of rhythmic energy up in her solo that follows here, and harmonic tension. Hamill fills out with nuanced pitched tom work when they get back to the opening chord idea. I'm going to leave you to sample both of these in their entirety, back to back as suggested, since we've got 11 total tracks to get through on this recording. Track 7, Going to the Sun. This is a Wyatt original, and it's named after the Going to the Sun Highway in Montana. The rhythmic movement is interesting here. Left-hand piano chords and bass have a catchy little sequence that seems to be in a pattern of beats 3-4-3-5, 3-4-3-5, while Wyatt skips out a cute melodic figure on top. That repeats, and then there's a 16-measure section with ringing bass figures that feels like 3-4 time before the first section comes again. Let's check this out. And Wyatt plays through the next section into her improvised solo. I really like how she works this up. It's like lazy winds gathering into a storm with some bluesy touches in there as well. Keeps going to a percussive chord climax. Hamill gets some tight drum work that builds energy over vamping that works into the final melody section that ends with the ringing bass section we heard. Track 8 is a tune by the drummer Hamill, Bardo, and the notes say, in some schools of Buddhism, Bardo is an intermediate, transitional, or liminal state between death and rebirth. This piece is an attempt at expressing this undefinable state that transcends language, trying to imagine what liminality sounds like. This one draws you in with its sparseness. There's a hypnotic bass and left-hand piano line that's organized in 3-measure phrases. One pattern is 6 measures. That goes around twice with little piano figures on top. There's a harmonic change and a pattern switch up before the 3-measure grouping comes again. Let's check it out. The cycles repeat with improvisations from Wyatt and Vedati. Let's hear some of his playing on this one. It goes one more time through, like in the beginning, and it continues on, paring back even more to an ending. Track 9 is a Wyatt composition Succession. The notes say, "Most of my inspiration comes from the beauty of nature. Born and raised next to the ocean, I feel at home every time I can sit next to the endless succession of waves." There's definitely a wave-like rocking motion created by the rhythms and four-measure phrases here. It's in a 3/4 meter, and the melody is in an A-B-A shape of 16-measure sections. The B section contrasts with bass intervals and ringing repeated high notes. Let's check it out. Listening to it again, now I think it's in 6/8 time. Anyway, the highlight here is Wyatt's crashing wave climax of chords in her solo, so let's hear the waters turn choppy here. And it comes down soft for a return to the original melody idea, but Hamill really gets to generate some drum energy on an extended B section before a softer final A section ending. Track 10 is by Vedati. It's Embers, and the notes say it was written after a Donnybrook on the road on tour. The fire died down, but the embers persist. It's not a word we hear very often, is it, Donnybrook?
What is a Donnybrook?
I guess it's an argument or some sort of
That's
conflict.
what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a punch-up or something.
We don't have any Donnybrooks on this podcast. Not yet, anyway.
We're too far away.
Vedati gets it started out with a solo bass opening and then sets up the 6/8 feel with a simple interval bass line. A minimalist kind of approach here with a simple piano melody of 2 10-measure sections. After the piano melody, Vedati is up for a solo, and then Wyatt. Let's hear some of her lines that have an interesting sense of weight. And the final melody just gets 1 10-measure section before building up tension to a sparse ending over the bass interval. And the recording ends up with track 11, also by Vedati, Music is Beautiful, and the notes for this are a quote from Bill Frisell. Music is beautiful. Whatever I can do with whatever it is I've got, I'm going to try as best I can to make something out of it. Maybe I can't do what they are doing, but I'm going to find a way to do something. Music is big enough for everyone, infinite. We all find our own way, our own voice. Interesting coming from Bill Frisell, because we always feel when we hear him play, he sort of puts the mark on an album. You know, it sounds like him.
Yeah.
It becomes his atmosphere. This has a gently flowing 38-measure melody in 3/4 time with subtle fills from Hamill in the spaces. Let's just hear this one get going. And I like the stretched feeling of Wyatt's phrasing on this tune in her solo, so let's take one final sample. and Vedati has a solo too, before a final time through the melody to finish up the song and the recording. One of the things that I always hope for in a piano trio recording is a synergy and intuitive sense of communication, and these three musicians really have that type of meld. The music breathes and flows through the program rather than becoming hard driving, even on more rhythmic tunes like Coruscation. Also, there's a real sense of equality of input from the members, with Vedati often getting the center of melodic attention or getting things started on the tunes. Other than a reimagined and reharmonized Mac the Knife, the rest of the tunes are all originals by the members and generally have minimal structures because they plan on taking them somewhere new through their collective efforts. The music comes out sounding fresh. Wyatt can build up excitement with percussive chords or meandering harmonic ideas, but her smoothness of line always brings her improvisations into a coherent arc, and I enjoyed that sense. Vedati has a pleasing tone that often rings out in his backing bass lines and catches your ear, and his solos have a very nice melodic sense. Hamill's nuanced and paints with tones and textures mostly. That fits the flowing approach to the music nicely. His more energetic moments come mostly on restatements and vamping sections of the melodies, which become part of the stylistic approach. It's often introspective, but there are plenty of moments where spontaneous expressions bloom out of the songs.
The tracks on this album are generally played at a slower mid-tempo. It leaves a lot of space for soloists to play in, and Kate Wyatt is quite the idea person at the piano, breaking down Mac the Knife into its elements and not afraid to use chromatics, forte dynamics, and dissonance in her playing. She's also rather adamant at the keyboard, going for dramatic climaxes to her well-proportioned solos and sounding comfortable in the forte dynamic. The bass player in this trio, Adrian Vedati, offers a sort of contrast. Playing emphatically on the bass, he plucks the strings hard when he solos, and generally bringing a sunny feeling to his well-shaped solos. Not always the case with bass players, by the way. Louis Vincent Hamill on drums uses the toms a lot when he gets a chance to step out, and he's always soloing under a vamp, and this brings his soloing a unique character of the playing on the toms so often. It's an album with relaxed tempos, but nonetheless dramatic climaxes, and the breakdown of Mac the Knife is a good indication of what's to come.
Yeah, it's kind of a free, expressive, and intimate recording. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I thought so too. She has kind of these appealing sort of turns to her phrases too that I really rather liked.
All right, let's go over to France for our next recording, trumpeter Thibaut Renard.
I'm always up for going to France.
Yeah, Quiet Blue. And this is on the Justin Tross label. Came out October 10th. Thibaut Renard is a French trumpeter, composer, educator, and linologist, born in 1976. That's about all I can find out about him on the internet, and this is his debut recording. Thibaut Renard on trumpet and all original compositions, David Sauze on tenor and soprano saxophone, Daniel Gasson on piano, Mauro Gargano on bass, and Andrea Michelutti on the drums. Produced by Levon Desjardins, recorded, mixed, and mastered by Julien Bassoret at Studio de Meudon. The recording will start out with a tune called Shifting Tones. A rising and falling bass and piano left-hand line sets the mood on the intro for this one. A nice groove here. The 32-measure horn melody is harmonically in an AABA form, but the horn lines are different for each A section, and Sauze's sax takes the lead on the B. Let's hear this recording get going. Gusson is up first for a piano solo with a nice funky feel. You hear her getting going there. And then Renard. So let's hear his trumpet solo on this one and a little bit of Sauze's sax solo as well. Phrasing by both, and I really like Gasson's chord backing there. They take it around the melody once more and keep on vamping with both horns getting simultaneous improvisations. Track 2 is Blue Hills. This one gets going with a bass ostinato that the melody comes in over. It's a 44 measure tune starting out in an ABA shape, but then new things come along with fun syncopation. Is up first for a solo on this one. He has nice phrasing even when blowing double time lines. Sauze follows with a soulful sax solo. Let's check out Gasson's piano solo on this one that has fun rhythmic figures and fleet runs. To a shorter melody section from there to wrap it up. Track 3 is Scratch That, a hard bopping modal tune with a 24 measure melody with tricky intervals and some cool bass and left-hand piano lines. Sauze is off from the melody on a solo. Let's check it out. builds a really nice climax to his trumpet solo with rising lines on this one, so let's hear a little of his playing as well. Up some energy on the drums, under the vamp, back into the melody, and Gassin gets some improvisations before the horns are back to finish it up. Track 4 is the title track, Quiet Blue. This has a repeating 22-measure melody idea. It has a kind of stuck-in-place phrasing at the beginning, but then changes up rhythmically and goes off swinging harder as Gargano gets the bass walking. Renard's up first for a solo that starts animated and then chills out, and Soze is smooth and slinky on the sax here, so let's check out some of his playing on this one. Has a relaxed swinging piano solo that gets up into the high register and ends with some sticky chords before a final melody section that slows at the ending. Track 5 is Knuckle Samba. That's better than a knuckle sandwich.
Indeed. It's actually the opposite of a knuckle sandwich, I think.
Micheludi gets a fun beat going to start things out. Soze switches to soprano sax for this one. The melody is in 16-measure sections, starting with sax, then trumpet, then the two work some sections together. Trade off improvised lines on this one into simultaneous playing, so let's hear some of that interaction. Gussin follows on piano before a final time through the melody. Track 6 is Time Vagabond, and this is pretty cool. I'm going to guess that the time signature is 7/8, starting out in the 8-measure intro. The horn melody has a repeating line over that time signature for 8 measures, then it switches up to 6/8 for 7 measures before going back to 4 measures of the 7/8, and there's a final section with horns trading off. Let's check this tricky rhythmic tune out. Gargano has a bass solo first on this tune, so it's a good chance to hear some of his playing. Jose and Bernard follow, and Gussin gets some horn backing lines for his solo on piano before a final time through the tricky timed tune. Track 7, Body and Truth. This is a neat little bass and left-hand piano figure that starts off in the introduction. The modal tune is in an AABA structure with 16 measure sections. In the B section, it switches up from the straight beat to a swing feel for short sections. Sauzet and Gussin all have solos before they reset things with the intro and go through the tune again with some simultaneous horn improvising at the end to a fade out. For the sake of time, I'll let you check out the solos on this one on your own. Track 8 is Antique Blues. This one has Gargano furiously walking the bass under a minor 24-measure melody. If you count it at half time, it works as a 12-bar minor blues. Sauzet is out of the gate with a sax solo starting out just over the drums. Renard is next, and Gussin follows with an animated solo too that gets some cool horn backing lines, and they trade eights with Micheludi after that, so let's check some of that out. To wrap it up. Track 9 is Sweet Rise. This is a happy ambling tune. It has a fun little pickup into the melody that's basically in an AABA shape, but the final section goes in a new direction and is longer at 12 measures. And then things get sparse and quiet for a bass solo from Gargano. No trumpet solo on this one, but Sauzet and Gussin get solos before they get back to the melody. So let's hear one more from Gussin on this one. And the recording finishes up with track 10, Shifting Tones Reprise. This is another take of the opening track tune. It's longer than the first track and takes a more laid-back groove. The solo order is the same. Everyone is a bit bluesier, maybe because of the different groove here. Anyway, you can check it out and compare the differences. So a fine debut from Thibaut Renard here. It all fits into the post-bop pocket nicely. Renard shows off his composition skills with an all-original program that has a lot of variety, from straight and Latin grooves to swing, often changing up on the way, boppy melodies and modal lines to enjoy in varied structures, and sometimes tricky time signatures like in Time Vagabond. Renard is a lyrical and melodic soloist, phrasing nicely and never showing off just for the sake of it. Sauzet is a good complement on the harmonized horn lines, and his personal sax solo style on tenor and soprano is featured, along with classy solos on piano from Gussin. Gargano and Micheludi make good grooves on bass and drums, and also get their spots to say something. I wonder what wine Mr. Renard recommends for pairing with Quiet Blue.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because we had that wine thing at the beginning.
Yeah, he's a winologist, so...
Well, I'll tell you, whoever's doing the production on this album was drinking a pretty fine wine too, because I thought that was really great too. This album had really clear sound that comes across as natural. Every element is clear and upfront, including the very present sounding piano, an instrument that's really hard to record because it can really just burst out really loud and just ruin your levels and things like that. But that doesn't happen here. It just sounds great. The piano comes across powerfully on the album as well. I noticed Daniel Gasson on piano really has a knack for playing continuous lines without many, if any, phrase breaks when he solos. He left me a bit breathless in a good way. I like his entire sound and approach, really. Trumpet and sax both complemented and contrasted each other well. The David Sauze's sexy, slinky approach to soloing, throwing Renard's solo trumpet sound with direct tone and well-played in proportion phrases into relief. It's really good old-school jazz, a comfortable listen with some interesting solo ideas.
Yeah, great American music from France.
There you go. They always do that to us.
All right, in our final recording, we'll come back to the U.S. for this one. Saxophonist Chris Byers, The Dark Forest on Steeplechase. It came out October 10th. Chris Byers was born in 1970 in New York City to musical parents. His mother was a first clarinet in the American Symphony Orchestra, and his father played oboe and English horn in the New York City Ballet Orchestra. Byers had an early career as an opera singer, during which he performed dozens of productions for the New York City Opera and the Metropolitan Opera, including many high-pressure solo roles. He appeared in the title role of the made-for-television production of The Spellbound Child, which aired in 1982 on PBS's Great Performances series. Byers has a Bachelor's of Music and also a Master's of Music in Jazz Studies and Performance from the Manhattan School of Music. He's served as a musical instructor for the New School, Jazz at Lincoln Center, and the New York City Board of Education. As a cultural envoy for the U.S. Department of State, he's performed educational outreach for school audiences abroad in 58 countries. Back in episode 113, American Rhythm and Moods from May of 2023, we heard his Look Ahead, also on Steeplechase, and that was with guitarist Pasquale Grasso. I think that was his 17th album as a leader, and last year he released Boptics, and now this recording, which caught my eye because it's a cordless sextet. So no piano or guitar, all the harmonies will come from the horn arrangements. There's very little information online about this album yet because that's the way Steeplechase is, but Byers has a little bit of information on his discography on his homepage. This is the lineup of musicians here. Chris Byers on tenor sax, clarinet, and flute. All the arrangements and compositions here, well, mostly are his, other than the first track, I think, which we'll get to in a moment. Zaid Nasser on alto saxophone, Stefano Doglioni on bass clarinet, John Mosca on trombone, Ari Rowland on bass, Keith Bala on drums. This was recorded on October 8th, 2024 at Trading 8 Studio in Paramus, New Jersey, engineering by Chris Sulit. The arrangements on this recording are so full of ideas and many changes and different sections. It's going to be hard to sample, but I'll do my best to pick out the cool spots that caught my ear. I'm imagining that as part of his cultural envoy work for the U.S. Department of State, he visited the land of the rising sun here where we are in Japan, because track 1 is called Nihon no Uta, or Japanese song or songs. Let's hear this get going with a neat 6/8 groove. The arranging is super cool with the bass clarinet and trombone lines catching your ear. And Byers emerges from the first section with a flute solo. We'll get about that far in this first sample. very cool. I hate to stop it there. Roland gets a bowed bass solo with horn backing, and then drums from Bala before the horn arrangement leads us into our first Nihon no Uta. If you've been digging the minor harmony and bass lines, you might be able to guess what it is. So that's Sakura, the Japanese folk song. We also get Momotaro, the children's song about the famous Peach Boy, a tune that was written in 1911 by Teiichi Okano. I'll skip over that one because I'm already 2 samples in, and we'll go to Ue o Muite, composed by Hachidai Nakamura, which was a huge hit for Q Sakamoto in 1961 and topped the U.S. charts in 1963. Let's hear a bit of that. In the U.S., this was given the title of the Sukiyaki song, which has nothing to do with the lyrics. The lyrics talk about look up so that you don't spill your tears. I read something that a music critic said it would be the equivalent of calling Moon River beef stew in another language.
It's a pretty funny, comparison.
By the way, this was the only single by an Asian artist ever to top the Hot 100 in the U.S. until the 2020 release of Dynamite by the South Korean band BTS. And when we were young, at the end of the disco era, the R&B duo Taste of Honey had a version of it in English with lyrics that aren't related to the original Japanese. That was in 1980 or so.
I don't remember that.
Well, before the end of this interesting collection of tunes stitched together here, Byers makes a bit of Down by the Riverside come into the arrangement as well. And all the horns have little solo spots throughout the arrangement, coming in at almost 10 minutes. Maybe I even missed another tune or reference in there. It's really genius arranging here. Track 2 is Touch and Go, a swinging tune with another great melody arrangement. It sounds like 36 measures with the opening section coming back after the first 16. Let's hear it. Tenor sax, alto sax, trombone, and bass clarinet come in order with 8-measure solo lines. Roland gets bowed bass solo spots in the arrangement, so let's hear a little bit more of this tune. connect back to the opening melody arrangement and a neat little ending. Track 3 is Ide Postare Ide. Hold on to your hats for this one. It bursts out with flurries of horn and tight drum figures. Then there's a legato minor melody that seems at halftime to the furious bass walking underneath, ending in the fast horn line figures, and Mosca is off on a trombone solo that must really heat up the grease on that slide. He's really going to town there. Let's hear some of Byers' tenor sax solo on this as well. Follows on bass clarinet, and then Nasser on alto. Roland gets more bowed bass, and Bala gets a drum solo too, before we hear the melody again with a fun modulating ending. Track 4, the title track, The Dark Forest. This starts with just the winds, like a chorale. I love the descending bass clarinet line in here. Let's hear this get started. Bowed bass and drums will sneak in, and then something new with a fast tempo carried by the drums. Byers gets a tenor solo and Nasser on alto sax. Doglioni and Mosca get solos too. Roland gets some bowed bass, and things slow down and chill out for a bit before taking off on a loping swing. It slows down even more and takes on a processional feel with some staccato figures in the horns, and the ending is something else altogether, so we just need to hear it. And nice clarinet work there from Byers. Track 5 is 210%, an old-time swinging mood for this 32-measure melody with a great arrangement. Byers comes out of it on tenor sax for a solo first. Nasser and Doglioni follow. Let's hear some of his bass clarinet solo into Roland's bowed bass on this one. Gets a drum solo too before the 16-measure final melody section. Track 6 is called Resolutions, a dreamy ballad with a horn arrangement that starts sparse in the tenor sax and bass clarinet and has the other horns weave in. It sounds like 23 measures on the melody. Let's hear it get started. Has a trombone solo first, then Byers on tenor, and after some bowed bass, Nasser and Doglioni get solos too, with some more bowed bass then. I'll leave the solos for you to check out on this one. Track 7, This Account is Private. Swinging and bopping with this tune, it's in an AABA shape with 16-measure A sections, but an 8-measure B. Byers is off soloing with horn line interjections in kind of a big band style. And let's hear some of Roland's really animated bass solo on this one. Next, then Mosca and Nasser, and Bala has some drum time on this one too. Track 8 is Blessing for Giacomo. This is a slow 3/4 ballad with a 32-measure melody. The second half of the melody starts similarly, but the arrangement keeps bringing new combinations in. Byers has a gentle tenor sax solo on this one before they take it another time through the melody. It's the shortest tune on the recording at just under 4 minutes. And the recording ends up with track 9, 11th Street. Bala's drums get this one going. It's a 32-measure swinging AABA melody. The horns are mostly phrasing together with some departures, and my ear keeps getting drawn to Doglioni's bass clarinet lines over in the left channel, and he's up first for a solo.
And that's because it's a bass clarinet. We're always listening to those.
Absolutely.
It's us.
Mosca has an agile trombone solo, Nasser a tart alto solo, and Byers a bouncy solo on tenor with a fun low honk in there as well. Roland gets a bowed bass solo. Let's check out this line that goes into Bala's drum solo. the sunny melody from there to finish up the tune and the album. Chris Byers sounds very fine on tenor sax, flute, and clarinet. His compositions feature melodies that refresh familiar ideas all the way back to New Orleans swing, bop, and post-bop styles, with the opening track, Nihon no Uta, a standout for its skillful reworking of Japanese folk tunes and popular songs. Byers' arrangements for this sextet make everything special, filling out all the harmonies and stringing together endless combinations of the horns to keep you interested and entertained right through. Solo-wise, it's really a shared experience here with everyone getting equal time to blow. Nasser on alto, Doglione on bass clarinet, mostly in the higher register in his solos, and Mosca with agile trombone slide work. Their individual voices emerge from the tight arrangements. Roland's bass work grounds everything harmonically nicely, and he's featured throughout with energetic bowed solos, and Bala's drums add nuance and excitement, marking out all of the changes that happen along the way. This album should have wide appeal for jazz fans of all different styles.
Yeah, I think so too, and another reason is because these are, for the most part, structurally complex compositions, especially Nihon no Uta. I was pretty impressed by that too. They're creatively thought out as well, often going into entirely new sections as they play. I'm thinking of Nihon no Uta and The Dark Forest especially. These two compositions bring in a lot of popular themes. I like the compositions and arrangements on this album. They came across as really sophisticated. The entire album keeps the ear and brain engaged as far as the timbral combinations and compositional moves are concerned. There are a lot of different instruments, so there are a lot of ways to combine them, so that was great too. Solos are generally pretty short, as everyone in the rather large band gets a chance in the spotlight on most tracks. Byers and Nasser are well paired, as each has a dramatically different tone on their respective saxes. Byers' candlelit, breathy tone was a pleasure to hear. I especially liked them both in Blessing for Giacomo, where both played at the edge of the tone registering. John Mosca is amazingly fleet on all of his trombone solos and showing great agility with this really large instrument. Adi Roland bows all of his bass solos while Keith Bala keeps it tight on the drums, even while soloing. I would have liked to hear more bass clarinet at the forefront from Stefano Doglione. He's in there, but you got to kind of listen in. What drew me here was the creativity in the compositions and arrangements mostly. It was engaging all the way through. Great soloing too, but I really liked the combinations and the compositions themselves.
Yeah, it's really great arranging, skillfully done. And as you said, the timbral combinations, you don't have a trumpet here, which is an interesting choice. So you've got
two saxes.
You've got all the woodwinds and then the warm, rich trombone. And it's just a really interesting combination. And then you get a little bit of flute and clarinet on the top end once in a while from Byers in there. It must have been a lot of hours arranging all of the lines for these tunes, but man, I really enjoyed the result. All right, and that's going to wrap things up for episode 232. As we said at the beginning, we'll be back with the next episode on November 3rd. We're going to have to spread out the listening around some different events over the next 2 weeks. But we do have a lineup already. So many great recordings in classical and jazz came out this past week. So what do you have on the classical side for next episode?
Yeah, there are a lot of good classical recordings that came out this week, and I'm not going to talk about any of them yet because I'm going to sort of shut the door on September and October, I think. Just one more of those, and then I'll get to those the week after. So the first thing I'm going to do is a recording I've been sitting on for a while. This is Dowland and Purcell, Songs of Passion. Thomas Dunford on lute and his wife, Leah DeSandra, soprano. I really love these two together. This also features the Jupiter Vocal Ensemble and Jupiter Instrumental Ensemble. And the reason we haven't done it yet is because it's a double album, but not a very long one. And being that we have the time, I figured this would be a good opportunity to get it in as a Baroque recording. Next, we have an album of Spanish piano quartets that I'm really curious about, and this is by Trio Lyrico, and it's on the Marche Vivo label, who we've never talked about, and quite frankly, I've never heard of, so I wanted to give them a chance and see what's going on with them. And then our contemporary composer will be Anna Klein, who's really making a big splash in England. Well, she's actually making a big splash in the USA. She's British, but she now resides in the US, and she's getting a lot of commissions there, and her last few albums have really gotten a lot of comments, so I wanted to give her a listen. We haven't talked about her on the podcast yet, so I wanted to make sure I got her in.
Well, in Jazz, there's 3 recordings that I've been waiting for to come out, and, well, they're all on the Origin or OA2 labels, one of our favorite labels, and they're all recordings by artists that we've enjoyed in the past. And so these are the 3 that I just really want to hear right away, so that's how I picked them. We're going to start out with trumpeter Eric Jacobson and his Affinity Trio, New Outlook. The next will be vibraphonist Ted Piltzecker with Peace Vibes. That's on OA2. We really enjoyed his last album. And this one also has the great Brad Good on trumpet on it as well. So I'm looking forward to listening to this. And then another trumpet player who we really enjoyed before, Anthony Stanko. And this is a live recording, In the Groove, live at the Alluvion. And that's also on OA2 Records. All those came out just Friday, the 17th. I've only just spot listened to them, but I know they're all going to be great. So that's what I'm going to be listening to get ready for the next episode. As always, we want to say thanks to Fast Science of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. All these recordings in classical and jazz will be up a little bit after this episode is published on our Deezer playlists, and I'll get around to putting a link to that on our Facebook page as well if you want to get listening along with us before the next episode. Any final thoughts this time, Mike?
Well, going back to the comment about the gorillas at the beginning of the podcast, is something to think about over the 2 weeks that we won't be around. If a guerrilla army were in the woods long enough, would they become actual guerrillas eventually? There it is. That's my existential question of the week.
Right.
You can't even think of what to say after that. Yeah. And neither can anyone in the audience. There you go. I just blew you all away.
All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks then with episode 233. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.